Good afternoon, good people. Thank you for allowing me to present today's material, which is titled Tone and Tenor versus Message. Today, thanks to many things, but more importantly, things like unhealed trauma, television, social media, agendas created and controlled by the power structures that be, people tend to focus more on the delivery of a message as opposed to the message in and of itself. With that being said, I'm going to start with tone. Tone as it pertains to language and speech. They say that tone of voice refers to the way someone speaks, which can convey different emotions or attitudes. For example, someone might speak in a harsh tone when angry or a gentle tone when comforting. In some languages, like Mandarin Chinese, tone is a crucial element of pronunciation where different tones of voice can change the meaning of a word. So tone carries emotional implications according to the academics. When having a conversation with someone, tone appears to carry a lot of weight for people who are focused on it. But is this a good thing? We'll hopefully answer this question later in the presentation. Now let's examine tenor. In the context of language, tenor can have a couple of different meanings depending on a specific area of study. One, systemic functional linguistics. In this field, tenor refers to the participants in a discourse, their relationship to each other, and their purposes. It's about understanding who is communicating with whom, the nature of the relationship, like, for example, whether it's formal, informal, intimate, distant, and why they are communicating. Tenor helps us to understand how social context influences social choices and language choices. For example, the language you use with your boss will definitely be different from the language that you use with your friends. Then when you look into figurative language, when discussing metaphors and similes, tenor refers to the subject of or concept of being compared. It's the underlying idea that the writer wants to convey through the figurative language. I'll give you an example, like a metaphor, which we know the scriptures, the holy scriptures, the holy Bible is full of metaphors, but I'm gonna give you some other metaphors. Like he is a lion in a battle. The tenor is he, the person, and the vehicle is lion. The metaphor uses the characteristics of a lion, which are strength and courage, to illuminate the qualities of a person. There's some key considerations. Understanding tenor is crucial for interpreting language effectively as it helps to grasp the nuances of meaning and relationship between communicators. Tenor can be influenced by factors such as social distance, power dynamics, and the purpose of communication. So I hope that this clarifies, the meaning of tenor in context of language as it pertains to this presentation. Last but not least, let's get into the message portion of the presentation. A message is a conversation. In a conversation is a unit of communication exchange between participants. It's the information, idea, or feeling that one person wants to convey to another. Messages can take many forms, such as spoken words, which is the most common form of messages in face-to-face conversation. Written words used in emails, text messages, social media, letters, and online chats and stuff like that. You have nonverbal cues, which is body language, facial expression, gestures, and tone of voice can all convey messages. Symbols, images, icons, and other visual representations can communicate messages. Key characteristics of a message in a conversation, these all hold that. Purposeful, messages are usually sent with a specific intention, whether it's to inform, persuade, request, or express emotions. Contextual, so we put things in their context. Um, the meaning of a message is influenced by the context in which it is sent, including the relationship between the participants, the settings, and the ongoing topics of conversation. You got interactive, language is long because the message, this is the way you get messages out there to people. Interactive, which is conversations, involved in the back and forth exchange of messages between participants. Each message builds upon the previous ones and shapes the direction of the conversation. Interpreted messages are not always received and understood in the same way that they were intended. The receiver's interpretation of a message can be influenced by their own experiences, biases, and cultural background. So, in essence, a message in a conversation is the fundamental building block of a communication. It's the way we share our thoughts, feelings, and intentions with others. And it's what makes conversations dynamic and meaningful. So the question is, why do people miss out on the message due to the tones that they perceive? People miss messages due to tone for several interconnected reasons. Tone can overshadow content. A strong or unexpected tone can grab our attention so forcefully that we focus on how something was said rather than what was said. If someone said, "That's a great idea," sarcastically, we might focus on the sarcasm and miss that they were actually, albeit poorly, expressing approval. Emotional responses, tone carries emotional weight. If the tone is perceived as aggressive, dismissive, or condescending, it can trigger an emotional reaction in the listener. The emotional response can cloud judgment and make it difficult to process the actual content of the message. We might become defensive, hurt, or angry, preventing us from understanding the speaker's intended meaning. And then that brings about misinterpretation, where the tone in the message is subjective. What one person perceives as playful teasing, another might interpret as offensive. These misinterpretations can lead to misunderstandings and missed messages. We might assume a negative intent where none exists, or vice versa. Cultural differences I mentioned earlier. Tone varies across cultures. A tone considered direct and assertive in one culture might be seen as rude and aggressive in another culture. These cultural differences can lead to misinterpretations and missed messages, even when there's no ill intent. Perceived notions, our existing biases and perceptions about the speaker can influence how we interpret their tone. If we already believe someone is condescending, we're more likely to interpret their tone as such, even if it's unintentional. Then there's lack of awareness. Sometimes the speaker isn't even aware of the tone that they're conveying. They might be focused on the content and not realize that their delivery is undermining their message. Likewise, the listener might not be aware that their own sensitivities are causing them to misinterpret the tone. You got distractions, there's external distractions, there's internal thoughts. Whew, can make it difficult to fully focus on the content, both the content and the tone of a message. If we're distracted, we might miss subtle cues in the tone that are crucial for understanding the message. So the gist of it is tone acts as a filter through which the message is processed. If the filter is distorted by any of the previously mentioned factors, the message can become garbled or lost entirely. Effective communication requires both the speaker and the listener to be mindful of tone and to strive for clarity and understanding. So, who's responsible for tone? The listener or the speaker? These questions go back to the age-old question of the battle of the tongue versus the ears. The question of the tongues versus the ears is a great question that gets at the heart of communication. Let's speak about why I say that the responsibility of the message belongs to the listener. So, the listener has responsibilities. Active listening, listeners need to actively listen, paying attention to both the content and the tone of a message. This means focusing on the speaker's words as well as nonverbal cues as to how they may be standing. If you're standing with your arms crossed or something like that, or if you're standing with an open and open tone with your body, seeking clarification. If the listener is unsure about the speaker's tone or the meaning of their message, they should ask for clarification. This can help prevent misunderstandings and ensure effective communication. Consider the context. Listeners should also be considering the context of the conversation, including the relationship between the speaker and the listener, the setting, the ongoing topic of the conversation. All of these things can help provide a better understanding of the speaker's message. The listener needs to be managing emotional responses. They should be aware of their own emotional biases and how they might be influencing their interpretation of a speaker's tone. If they have a strong emotional reaction, they should take a moment to calm down and try to understand the message objectively. Some professionals say that it's a shared responsibility. I say that this is impossible for the speaker if you don't know the past experiences and traumas experienced by the listener. So a very important message could be missed if you choose to focus on the tone rather than what's being said. So in conclusion, this is a very difficult and complex topic to tackle because as a listener, a person would have to basically die to themselves. You know, they would have to be trained and practiced in not making everything about them and their past life and their experiences and things of that nature. To try to focus on the message, the messages that are being communicated to you through the infinite ways that are out there. You know, make it about the message that you're receiving and less about you and what's going on in your head and watch your life transform. Thank you for your time. This is a short, quick one. And now I will field questions.
I got one question, Doc. Why do you think that tones get misinterpreted?
Good question. Because tone and passion look a lot alike. People, for some reason, have a hard time distinguishing between the two of them. Tone, passion. You know, unfortunately, in the United States of America, when certain people, you know, for some people, passion is looked at as being aggressive, and but for the other side, it's passion. So, but those are the cards that we're dealt with. So when you're having a spirited conversation, or if there is passion in your voice while delivering a message, the message can get lost in your passion by people who bring themselves into what you're saying, bringing their past, their traumas, and their whatever's going on. Maybe dad was a yeller, and you're still traumatized by that. So you might be speaking to someone who's speaking to you in a spirited manner or with passion, and it'll automatically take you back to your dad yelling at you. Now all of a sudden you thinking about your dad and how that made you feel. And meanwhile, this person steady talking, you missing everything that's being said because you off in your head, you know, going back to your experiences. And so this is how tone can get misinterpreted. It can only be interpreted, period, by your experiences, by your life's traumas, by the things that went on with you, because you can't experience those things from the speaker's position. So you can only be bringing you into it, and so you can get into the way. And this is why tone gets misinterpreted. I hope that answered the question for you.
Yes, it did. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I got a question, Doc. First of all, great presentation. It's gonna be a kind of two-part question, dealing with the statement of judging a book by its cover. How do you deal with being judged by your cover, but in the same aspect, what advice would you give to a person in power to not judge a book by its cover?
Great question. So how do I deal with it? Me personally, I can't deal with it. I mean, everyone is entitled to their opinion, you know. And when you look in this country, the First Amendment is the freedom of speech, and that amendment was so important that the Second Amendment that followed that was the right to bear arms to protect that First Amendment. So for me, everyone has a right to speak. Everyone has a right to an opinion, whether it's the right opinion or the wrong opinion. You can have the wrong opinion about someone, and you can miss out on the blessings perhaps that person may have in store for you, you know. And so because of this, I tend not to take things personally like that. And once I had to come to the understanding that, man, people are entitled to have their opinions, and I can't stop people from having their opinions, and people are entitled to voice those opinions in whichever way they want to voice those opinions, and that's their God-given human right. And who am I to stand in the way? And then, as far as the second part of your question, how do I determine, you know, with someone else, through communication, by talking, by asking questions. And if you see that the conversation is going sideways, or if you see that someone's not picking up what you're putting down, then it's that's why people ask, hey, are you following me, or you here in the hood? You feel me? That's another way of ensuring that you're picking up what someone's putting down. And that way, at that point, you'd have to halt the conversation for a second and find out where it was dropped and why it's being dropped. And so when you look at other people, people all come with a myriad of emotions that are bottled up inside, because every last one of us have a past. You have people that have been abused, or whether it's been actual or in their head. And when I say that, I'm not talking about physical abuse, because that's not in someone's head, or sexual abuse, that's not in someone's head. But I'm talking about, when you're looking at verbal abuse, not saying that can't happen, that could happen, if you allow that to happen. you know However, everyone has their own history. So it's history for me, but it's his story or her story, and they're entitled to that. And so when I deal with people, I understand that these are the stories that they may have. And through my jobs, through the professional training of my jobs, we learn to pick up on different cues when you're talking to someone. You can kind of tell when someone's into the conversation and into you, because they're in your face and their eyes are all on you, and taking in every word. And then you got other people that are, while you're talking, they're drifting off, looking over to the left or to the right, or looking at different things. That person might not be that engaged. And so in that training, you learn that, and you go from there. I hope that answered your question.
Dr. Lee,
Yes, sir.
uh, in a conversation with someone, and you have all this past trauma and drama about people cursing and people yelling at you, and this person and the other person that you care about, you know, and 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 you tell them you don't want any cursing and any yelling, but then they tell you, well, they got to do that because they think something's wrong with the conversation. Either you didn't listen good enough, or you're not, they don't think you're getting something because they got to yell or they got to curse. How do you deal with that on both sides? Your side to adjust to people that won't have the freedom and the right to yell and to curse, and you that don't want to hear it at all and want it out of your whole life.
Well, just what you just said, the freedom. By me acknowledging that they have that freedom to yell and curse, I also have the freedom to turn and walk away. I also have the freedom to not listen. Now, me personally, cursing, swearing, all that I'm not, that doesn't offend me. If that's how you want, if you want to convey your language that way, that's up to you. Usually when you're using swear words, just for me now, that's a sign of, that's a person that with a smaller vocabulary. And so when the vocabulary is small, I tend to use swear words and curse words and stuff like that. And curse words, the curse is only on you. So what the words you send out, everything that you sends out comes back to you. That's why they call it a curse word, because it's cursing you. And so these words are cursing them. That has nothing to do with me. And as far as the yelling, now, like I said in the piece here, I have to determine if this yelling, is this passion? Is this someone being spirited? So I have to take that in, because you could be at a baseball game, Brother Jackson, and somebody can yell and scream and say something about the Yankees. Would I take offense to that? No, I'm not going to take offense to that. So a lot of it is context. I have to understand the context. And so for me personally, I can deal with the people's different modes of communication and different forms of communication. If someone wants to swear or someone wants to yell or do all of that, hey, so be it. That's up to you. But when I'm fed up with it, I can just turn around and walk away. I don't have to stay. I'm free to leave. I am not a hostage. I am a volunteer.
Thank you.
You're
I
welcome.
really enjoyed what you said. Thank you.
I appreciate you.
I
You're
have a
welcome.
question.
Yes, sir.
Um, can people use tone and tenor to manipulate a situation or a conversation to get a desired result?
Been doing it since the beginning of time, since the beginning of time. But that only works if you're able to be manipulated.
Mm,
And so that goes into your relationships. Now your relationships come in. So, well, mom asked me to do this, so I have to do that. Why? Because her title is mom. His title is dad. His title is brother. Her title is sister.
mm,
Oh, that's my guy. We went through the mud together. So, you feel tied to this person. And so, yes, people can use tenor and tone to manipulate the situation. Let's take it back. This goes back all the way to the garden, all the way back to the Garden of Eden, where the serpent used tenor and tone to manipulate Eve, who was able to be manipulated. Notice Adam wasn't there. Adam wasn't able to be manipulated, not by the serpent. He couldn't be manipulated by the serpent. Why? Because he spoke with God. He heard God tell him, hey, here's what I need you to do. Stay away from that tree. And here are your other duties. So he had affirmation that this was real. So the serpent couldn't say nothing to him, couldn't budge him. However, Eve, God never spoke to Eve. So she didn't hear those words from God. Adam told Eve. So Eve couldn't be sure. And the serpent knew this. And so he used tone and tenor to come in there and ask. And we all know what happened at the tree. And then he manipulated her because she was able to be manipulated. She didn't have that affirmation and that firm conviction because she didn't hear it from God directly. Now, once she ate from the tree, then she manipulated Adam. That's when Adam became able to be manipulated, and he ate from the tree with her, and when she gave it to him. And if you go back and read the story, it didn't say Eve took from the tree and ate from it, and then she ran and found Adam and gave it to him. No, it said then she turned around and gave it to him to eat, and then he ate. That means he was standing right there. So manipulation, absolutely. People use tone and tenor to manipulate at every stop, but that's only if you're able to be manipulated. And if you remove those titles from people and just see people for who they are, which is really one soul inside the body, we're all linked to the all, to the one. Once I remove that meat suit and take remove that body, and I see that you're me, I'm you. We're all part of the all, part of the source. But for as long as I allow you to keep that meat suit on and that's all I'm focused on, now I see us as different. And then now it depends on the title of this meat suit that's in front of me. Oh, that's mom. Oh, I'm manipulated. Oh, that's my wife or my girlfriend or my husband or my boyfriend. Oh, I'm manipulated. Oh, those are my children. Up, I'm manipulated. All because so it's the titles that manipulate us. And the reason why I say that is because if you would do it for one person, but you wouldn't do it for another person, then that's that person's title that manipulated you right there. So absolutely, good question, Steve. People definitely use tone and tenor to manipulate, and will continue to do that until somebody turn the lights out on this small planet.
Thank you for that. That was fantastic. Your explanation was spot on. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. Appreciate you.
Yeah, what comes to mind is also the word framing. You frame something, you put something, you build a container, put all the words inside, and then you give a person a certain outlook based on that. And I think this is something that can happen over and over again, and especially with this with words, you can frame somebody to a maximum, and then people are easily to be manipulated into believing something, and they just want to see those certain titles that were given a person by, let's say, the media, a newspaper, or the television.
Indeed, in fact, and I love the way you said framing. And when you talk about framing, I talked about when Brother Jackson mentioned people yelling and cursing, and how I said people that tend to use curse words all of the time, lack of vocabulary. So they have very minimal words to put inside that frame. So when they bring their frame around, this this is minuscule compared to a politician per se. It has millions of words inside this frame. And so the chance of you being manipulated by the politician is probably greater than the chance of you being manipulated by the person that's swearing and throwing curse words out there and yelling. One of them has a more vast vocabulary set than the other. So yeah, you are absolutely right. Framing is a beautiful word. A beautiful word. Appreciate that. Someone sent me a question here in the thing. It says, "Is tone tied to emotion?" Most definitely. In order for emotion to get involved, you have to make something personal to you. If the conversation is not about you per se, and you go into your emotions, then it's personal to you, which is understandable if the message requires a change or an action from you. However, if the message is not concerning you personally and you bring emotion into it, then you're definitely pulling from a life experience of yours. And since it's your experience, it's your emotion, then it will be you bringing emotion into the conversation. That was a great question. I appreciate that. Somebody asked, do you think there's a reason why people bring their emotions into a neutral message? Yes. Reason is because, again, like I said, people carry around untreated trauma, like again, African Americans in this country have been forced to deal with untreated trauma. You don't tell a rape victim to get over the rape and move on, right? So African Americans have had an unfair start in this country, yet they're told to get over it and move on. This too brings about untreated trauma. And so that's not even counting the trauma that's in people's homes and what they come up with, that they have been forced to move on, to deal with it and move on without getting the proper treatment for it. And some people are embarrassed to thinking people think that the things that happen to them, they're the first person on the planet that these things have ever happened to. And this never happened to anyone. These things have never happened to anyone else, and it becomes that personal to the point where if they just went and spoke about it, they'll find out that they are not alone. That in fact you're common. I was speaking to my daughter, and we were talking about it one day, and she was just talking about how a lot of the girls that she went to college, she went to an all girls college. A lot of the girls had the same story about somebody molested them in the family, and she hadn't been molested. She's like, wow, I hadn't been molested. So typically when you talk about people that have been abused, whether it's sexual abuse, physical abuse, yeah, I think that's probably, if I was a bet man, I'd probably say that that's probably the norm. I think that if you run into people that hadn't experienced those things, that person's rare, and they're blessed, with the environment that they came up under. And so, I know I watched over my children like a hawk. But even I have to go to sleep. Even I have to go to work, so things of that nature. So that was a great question. Does anybody else have a question? There's one more question that popped up in the chat. It says, how do you suggest people deal with their trauma? Therapy, uh, which would be therapists, your ministers of your church, if you belong to one. There's community groups, you know, things like AA and NA and SA, and you got so many groups out there and so much. No matter which lane you take, I could definitely recommend you seeing someone about your troubles. Because I will say this though, being being stuck in your past brings about depression, and when you're worried about your future, this brings about anxiety. So my advice is for anyone is to be where your feet are, be in the moment. Take in the messages that are coming your way, whether they're verbal or nonverbal, and take what you want from it and get rid of what you don't want. And that will end my presentation. Thank you very much.